First You Think is a not-for-profit ministry of the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. Support us at ucdsm.org today.
Here we are, gathering in, kicking off our new church year. It is good to be together. As we begin our year, as we gather in, it's a good time to reflect on why. And the first answer is just that. It's good to be together. Good as it is, it's sometimes not easy for human beings, particularly human beings in these polarized, disconnected, alienating times. A poll by the American Psychiatric Association in January of this year found that 30% of U.S. adults feel lonely at least once a week, and 10% feel lonely every day. Last year, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy released an official advisory on our epidemic of loneliness and isolation. The report said that from 2003 to 2019, so this is before the pandemic, time spent alone increased for the average American from 285 minutes per day to 309 minutes per day, representing an increase of 24 hours a month spent alone. We need some time alone, but not 36 hours a week on average, which is what we were getting in 2019. And then the pandemic came, and of course, that number spiked further upward. From 2003 to 2020, the report said, time respondents engaged with friends socially in person decreased from 60 minutes per day to 20 minutes per day. That's not enough. In 1990, nearly a quarter of Americans, 27%, reported having 3 or fewer close friends. In 2021, nearly half, 49%, said they had 3 or fewer close friends. Whatever close friend might mean, Americans are reporting they feel close to fewer and fewer people. Being the Surgeon General, Murthy looked at this as a medical issue. The physical health consequences of poor or insufficient connection include, the report said, a 29% increased risk of heart disease, a 32% increased risk of stroke, and a 50% increased risk of developing dementia for older adults. Overall, lacking social connection increases risk of premature death by more than 60%. So, it's really good to be together. Just coming here is such an important thing that you do for yourself and for each other. And yet, any kind of relationship with others is something Americans have been finding it harder and harder to do. The thing we need most is relationships, writes David Brooks, adding, the thing we seem to suck at most is relationships. Why is that? Nicholas Epley, professor of behavioral science at the University of Chicago, commuted to work on the train, where he had an unvarying protocol. He said, I just sat there and ignored everybody. I would read a book, I'd listen to music, I'd scroll through my phone looking at the news, the kind of thing that everybody else does. Sit down, you leave other people alone. Epley was doing this even as he was on his way to the office, where among his academic duties, he was also working on a book describing how we are made happier and healthier by reaching out and connecting with others, and by being social. So one day it hit him like a lightning bolt, he says, that here we are, highly social creatures with brains uniquely adapted for connecting to the minds of others, and yet we're all sitting here ignoring each other. And that struck me as bizarre, he says. We have this image of the obnoxiously gregarious passenger, and we don't want to be that person, so we withdraw into our phone or a book. Where did we get that image? We probably picked it up from movies or TV rather than from experience. Epley says, I decided I would have a try at a conversation with somebody that morning. I would take an interest in somebody else. Eventually, all the seats are taken and a woman comes and sits down next to me. She's an African-American woman in probably her mid-50s or so, I would guess. She had on a bright red hat. I remember very vividly that hat. She sat down next to me and I decided I'm going to try to get to know a little something about her. And so I said the first thing that came to my mind, which was a joke, but a compliment at the same time. I complimented her on her hat, and I said how much I liked it, and that I had one just like it. And we both chuckled. I mean, it wasn't, look, it's probably not the best joke you've ever heard, but that got the conversation started. And from there, it just went. We talked about our careers and our jobs, what we did for a living, but also whether this was really what we wanted to be doing for a living. I remember her feeling sort of stuck in her job, and it wasn't quite what she wanted to do, and thinking about making a change. She talked a little bit about her family, how she needed to support her family. And the conversation went really fast. It was about a half-hour trip, and it was over so quickly. I was struck by that. As I got up to leave, I thanked her for taking time to talk to me, and she seemed delighted to have talked to me. And as I walked off the train, I remembered two feelings. One, that it felt nice. It was nicer than what I'd normally done that morning, which was probably scroll through the news. But the other thing I remembered was that it was surprisingly nice. I was surprised by how nice it was. So Epley, being a research psychologist, began a study. He and a colleague went to the Homewood, Illinois metro station and set up a sign on the way up to the train platform that recruited people to participate in an experiment if they were interested. He said, we handed them a $5 Starbucks gift card, and then we randomly assigned them to do one of three things on the train that morning. In one condition, we asked people to just do whatever they normally do on the train. In the next condition, this is our solitude condition, we asked people to keep to themselves, just focus on their day ahead and not engage other people in conversation. And in the third condition, we asked people to do the thing that I did on the train that morning, which was when somebody comes and sits down next to you, try to have a conversation. And when we handed them the envelope that had the Starbucks gift card in it and a survey. And we told them at the end of your commute, fill out the survey, drop it in the mail back to us, and off they went. The surveys came in, and they included questions like, how pleasant was your commute compared to normal? How happy do you feel after this commute? How sad do you feel? What we found, said Epley, was that people actually reported having the most positive experience when they talked to a stranger. And they had the least positive experience in the solitude condition, where we asked them to keep to themselves. The control condition, where people did whatever they normally did, fell in the middle, though since most people normally keep to themselves, it was closer to that end. We conducted another experiment where we asked people to tell us how they thought they would feel if they were in each of these conditions, to predict how they would feel. And what we found was that people actually predicted they would have the least positive experience in the connection condition and the most positive experience in the control and the solitude condition. And those expectations were precisely backwards. Epley goes on to say that extrovert versus introvert doesn't matter. He says psychologists have been doing lots of experiments where they ask people to behave more extrovertedly or more introvertedly, and the very consistent finding is that when people actually do this, people feel happier when they act extroverted than when they act introverted. And that's just as true for folks who are consistently extroverted as it is for folks who are consistently introverted. As far as we can tell, whether introversion and extroversion matters is not in people's experience of social interaction as much as it is in their choices of social interaction. That is, extroverts choose to reach out and engage with others a little bit more often than introverts do. And as a result of choosing to reach out, they tend to be a little bit happier. In many ways, it seems a little bit like physical exercise. Some of us choose to exercise more than others, even though all of us, regardless of whether we choose to or not, would actually be a little healthier if we exercised a little often, more often. The same thing seems to be true with our sociality as well. So research from Epley and others shows we systematically underestimate how much we will enjoy connecting with people and how meaningful our outreach will feel to others. Why do we underestimate this? We have a desire to connect, but we also have fears that lead us to avoid other people. And the avoid circuitry in the brain tends to win out over the connect circuitry more often than is really optimal for us. Most of us usually have to give ourselves a little push, stretch ourselves a little bit to go ahead and start up that conversation. The quality of the connection is especially enhanced if we don't just stay at the level of small talk. We have this idea that we have to get to know a person over a long period of time and slowly work our way up to deeper conversations. Actually, it doesn't have to take so long. You can very quickly, not quite immediately, I would say, but almost ask a relative stranger a really deep connecting kind of question. What do you regret most in your life? What do you want to be known for? What are you most proud of? If we were to become friends, what would be the most important thing for me to know about you? If a crystal ball could tell you anything about the future, what would you want to know? When was the last time you cried in front of another person? Or if you just say, tell me about yourself, they will often start going pretty deep into who they are, their hopes, their trepidations, their yearnings. We're afraid of being rebuffed, but Epley says, I cannot think of a time when I've tried to really connect meaningfully with somebody in conversation and they've said no. You take an interest in somebody, you ask about something they really care about, they are happy to talk to you about it typically. I am talking about gathering in as a congregation and what it takes to gather people into our lives. Why do we gather here? Why are we part of this church? I said first that it's just so good to be together, so necessary, even though it's sometimes a push to make ourselves do it. When we ministers get together, we have sometimes been wont to express a little frustration about congregants who seem to think church is just a social club. But you know, in these days of increasing isolation and loneliness, the fact is we do need more social clubs. If that's all that we were, that would be reason enough to keep the doors open. At the same time, it's not all that we are. We are not just a social club. We are a covenantal people, a people of covenant. And Bill and I reviewed the levels of covenant at the beginning of our service this morning. We have a mission, love radically, not typically what a social club would say, grow ethically and spiritually, serve justly. So we gather in because it's so good to be together, and we also gather in to carry out our mission. We gather in to love radically and to learn from, practice, and from each other, and to learn from and practice from, and to learn from each other how to do that. We gather in to grow ethically and spiritually. We have work to do. And like starting up a conversation with a stranger, it might feel a little uncomfortable at first. You can think of this church as a social club, but also as a gym. Earlier, I cited Nick Epley as saying that sociality was like exercise. Some of us may be more inclined to it, but it's good for all of us. This is a place for toning those spiritual muscles, strengthening the meaning, purpose, and wholeness of your life. In my sermon a year ago at our ingathering then, I cited my colleague, Reverend Victoria Weinstein. Let me this year remind you of what she said. If I go to the gym and people are sprawled out napping on the floor of the aerobics studio, I will think the gym management is not just remiss, but nuts. It's no different at church. We are all here for heart strengthening of a different kind. Leaders should be empowered to be able to say, "Get off the aerobics floor, please. You can nap at home." This isn't about not loving people. It's about being clear what the congregational life is for. Napping on the floor of the aerobics studio is not part of our mission, so we will not be addressing your complaints about the pillows. Thank you, Reverend Weinstein. To say that a church is a spiritual gym is not to forget that the church is also a spiritual infirmary. There are times in life when we come to church sick at heart, soul weary, broken-spirited. Before we can think about the exercises and the disciplines that cultivate and strengthen our wisdom, our compassion and equanimity, we just need some caring. We need replenishing rest. We need salve for our woundedness, for indeed salve is the root of salvation, with which our religious forebears were particularly concerned. Yes, the church has that pastoral function in addition to its prophetic task to serve justice. As the saying goes, the church's function is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. Let us recognize that every one of us is both, in some ways afflicted and in need of comfort, and in some ways comfortably complacent and in need of an afflicting prod. What we are here for, the reason we gather in, the thing that both comforts us in our affliction and afflicts us in our comfort, is this mission. Love radically, grow ethically and spiritually, and serve justly. We grow by continuing to learn and reflect, and to help focus that, we have 10 monthly themes that we'll be developing this year. Hospitality, fear, reason, awe and wonder, vow, borders and boundaries, dignity, caring, beauty, and community. Explorations of themes like these help you develop a language of faith, competency in our theology, and the inner resources for dealing with tough times when they come. So come to Sunday service, read each month's issue of Connecting, get out your journal and delve into the journaling prompts that are included in the issue. Sign up for and come to a connection circle. There's a handy QR code on the back of your order of service that will take you right to the place where you need to sign up. Radical hospitality is our theme this month, and it's what today's sermon has been about, though I didn't mention the word hospitality until now. The need for hospitality, given our epidemic of loneliness and isolation, the benefits of talking with strangers on trains or anywhere, both the benefits to us and to them, and how quickly we can go deep in conversations even with people we haven't known long. It doesn't come easily and naturally to us to open up to others, to build real connections. But that is what being hospitable is all about. As we gather in as a congregation, let us gather into our lives more people. We need it. They need it. May it be so. Amen.